Hello everyone, and welcome to part 1 of Learning C#. In this episode, we are going to go over variables and variable addition and other mathematical things. So what we're going to do is create a new solution and create a console project. I'm just going to name this variables and math. Oh, no spaces. Alright. So when you create a C# file, this is what you start with. And you don't need to worry about any of this stuff here. Just know that this is where we want to write our code, within the main static void function. And now we begin. So variables can store two different things, numbers and symbols. When you want to store a number in a variable, you can use an integer, which is any whole number. And what this equal sign does is initialize my variable to a specific value. If I could leave it blank, but it's good practice to initialize them to something. And then my second option is a float, which stands for floating point. And the difference between this and an integer is that I get access to decimals. If I type in a random decimal here, I'll be able to do stuff with that. And I'll go over the advantage of floating points over integers and the disadvantages when we get into the mathematics portion of the video. Now for symbols, if you want to store a symbol, you'd use a char type variable, which stands for character. And these can be letters, numbers, and symbols. And yes, that does include spaces. And then integers, or number storing variables, have a few more options. You also have a long integer, which stores a big number. So if you wanted to calculate like the square of 412 or something, you would want to use a long because you can store a much bigger variable. And similar to long, you get double, which doubles the amount of decimals you have access to in floating point. So if I wanted to take this number and have a more accurate range of decimals, I can do that. So when would you normally want to use each type? For integers, it's when you want to have whole numbers. And then for long, big numbers, which is, I would say, greater than like 1 million, but it's your decision really. And then floating points is when you want accuracy. And then doubles is for more accuracy. But there is something you have to note about floating points and doubles. Floating points have a limited amount of decimal range that you can go. So let's say I have a number 1, and if I increase it to 10, I'll lose 1 decimal space. And if I increase it to 100, I'll lose another decimal space. And it'll slowly get less and less accurate. And the same applies to doubles too. Which, because of this, if you're dealing with big numbers, or you want to have a really precise calculator or something, you would want to use doubles. Because increasing a really small number times 10 and moving the decimal over 1 does virtually nothing. It's pretty minuscule to have this many decimal places and have to move the decimal over 1. So now on to addition. So I'm going to use this console.writeLine in order to just do some addition with different number types. Also, real quick, when you declare a float, you have to put the letter F at the end, which is just good practice to remind you and the program that you want this number to be a float. You can also do that for whole numbers to make them float. So now I can do math and programming. So, 5 divided by 2. Now, mathematically, you would think it's 2.5. However, when it comes to integers, they cut off that decimal. The product has to remain a decimal, or an integer, because the values I am using involve integers. So, that leaves it at 2. But, if I were to convert one of these to a float, okay, I'm going to comment out all of this code because that's going to get annoying. But if I were to convert one of the numbers to the float, I get 2.5. This is because integers truncate the decimal, meaning everything after the decimal place gets chopped off because it only cares about the whole number. No fractions allowed. Because of this, whenever you're doing division or multiplication that needs a certain level of accuracy, you want to make sure your numbers are being converted to floats. So, I just wanted to give a bit of a few notes. So first, if you were to add two floats together, the result will be a float. You add two integers together, the sum will be an integer. And the same goes with all math. You multiply, you divide, but if you mix and match an integer and a float, the result will be a float. And this is important to know because when doing certain kinds of math and you get a weird error, then you might want to look back and see which data type your variables are becoming. Also, remember, long is a type of integer and double is a type of float. So if you have a long and you want to start working with doubles, it's best to start working with floating points, it's best to convert it to a double because you would potentially lose a lot of accuracy when you have such a big number and you want to tack on a big decimal to it. So that just about covers the different types of variables that we have available. In the next episode, we are going to start manipulating these variables by doing stuff like adding, multiplying, dividing, and finding the remainder. Just to go over all of the different arithmetic functions that will become very useful when we go to create our programs. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hope to see you in the next one.